You won't believe what happened when my HOA decided to drain the natural spring that had flowed on my property for generations, claiming it posed a flood risk. Little did they know, they were unleashing nature's perfect, albeit messy revenge. As their meticulously manicured lawns turned into soggy swamps, and designer kitchens flooded with the very water they tried to control, I uncovered a web of corruption that ran deeper than anyone could have imagined. "They can't just take your water," my wife Emily yelled, slamming the official HOA notice down on our kitchen table. My hands trembled as I picked up the paper, reading the words that would shatter our peaceful life. The natural spring, a bubbling source of life on my family's property for over a century, was now officially labeled a flood hazard by the Cascade Heights HOA. Eleanor Vance, our HOA president, who had moved in only 6 months prior, had clearly been eyeing my spring from the moment she arrived. In fact, during her very first neighborhood walkthrough, she'd called it an eyesore. "That muddy puddle brings down property values," she'd sneered, then making no effort to learn that this puddle provided fresh water for local wildlife and kept our corner of the neighborhood naturally cooler during scorching summers. Now this notice gave me a stark ultimatum: eliminate the water source within 30 days or face crippling daily fines of $500. Nausea washed over me. This spring wasn't just water, it was my grandfather's legacy. He'd built the charming stone pathways surrounding it, planted the willows that now stood a majestic 40 feet tall, and patiently taught me how to skip rocks across its glassy surface when I was just 5 years old. 2 days later, I found myself at an emergency HOA meeting, armed with seasonal photos of the spring and a petition signed by 12 neighbors who cherished it as much as I did. Eleanor sat at the head of the table like a queen on her throne, flanked by her loyal board members. Shockingly, Janice, my next-door neighbor, the one who'd always borrowed cups of sugar, now sat beside Eleanor, pointedly avoiding my gaze. "The spring poses a significant risk to our community's foundations," Eleanor announced, holding up a thick, imposing report. "This geological survey confirms potential flooding could cause millions in damages." I stood up, my legs unsteady, but my voice firm. "That spring has existed since before these houses were built. There has never been a single flood incident related to it. Times change, water tables shift," Eleanor countered, smoothly dismissing a century of stability. "We can't risk our children's safety for sentiment." "What children?" I pressed. "The nearest house with kids is 3 blocks away." A buzz filled the room. Some neighbors nodded in agreement with me, but others exchanged worried glances, whispering about mortgages and rising insurance rates. Suddenly Janice spoke up, her voice strangely flat. "I've noticed more mosquitoes lately. Standing water breeds disease." Still, she wouldn't meet my eyes. That's when it clicked. This wasn't about flooding at all. Eleanor wanted my property value to plummet so her developer friend could snatch it up cheap. I'd overheard her scheming at the summer barbecue, talking about maximizing land use potential in our area. "I demand to see this geological survey," I stated clearly. "Who conducted it? When did they visit my property?" Eleanor's smile tightened, becoming brittle. "The report is confidential, naturally, to protect the surveyor from harassment." "That's not how property assessments work," called out Mr. Davies, a retired lawyer from down the street. "The homeowner has an absolute right to review any reports pertaining to their land." Eleanor's face reddened. "We're not here to debate procedure. All in favor of the spring removal." 7 hands shot up instantly, all board members and their close associates. The motion passed just like that. As people filed out, I caught Janice in the parking lot. "Janice, why are you doing this? You used to bring your grandkids here to feed the ducks." She glanced around nervously. "Eleanor, She promised to approve my home addition if I supported her. I really need that extra bedroom for when my daughter visits. My heart sank. Eleanor wasn't just power-hungry, she was buying votes with favors. I drove home in a daze, wondering how I could possibly fight a system so blatantly rigged against me. Sleep eluded me that night. Around 2:00 a.m., the sound of vehicles outside roused me. Peeking through the curtains, I saw 2 trucks parked near my property line. Dark figures moved in the moonlight, carrying equipment towards my spring. Grabbing my phone and a flashlight, I raced outside in my pajamas. "Hey, this is private property." The men froze. One stepped forward, Mike, the HOA maintenance manager. "Just doing some preliminary measurements, sir, authorized by the board." At 2 in the morning, without notifying me, just then Eleanor emerged from the shadows, clipboard in hand, the picture of cool authority. "The HOA has 24-hour access rights for safety inspections, dear. It's in your contract." "This isn't an inspection, you're planning something, Joaquin." She smiled coldly. "We're simply being proactive about resident safety. Now go back to bed." I stood my ground until they finally left, but an ominous feeling told me they'd be back. The next morning, I desperately called 3 lawyers. 2 politely declined as soon as they heard HOA dispute, and the third wanted a hefty $5,000 retainer just to review my case. Feeling cornered, I drove to the county records office. Hours spent sifting through dusty files finally revealed something shocking. The geological surveyor Eleanor had hired was actually her brother-in-law, whose professional license had been suspended 2 years prior for falsifying reports. Furthermore, I discovered that Cascade Heights was built on an ancient watershed system. My spring wasn't merely decorative. It acted as a crucial pressure release valve for underground water flow. Capping it, I realized, with growing horror, could spell serious trouble for the entire neighborhood. Armed with this damning information, I requested another emergency HOA meeting. Predictably, Eleanor denied it, citing no new evidence. But I had one more card to play. I quickly created a simple website detailing all my findings: the spring's century-long history, photos, the truth about the bogus geological report, and the surveyor's suspended license. Then, I shared the link on our neighborhood Facebook group. Within hours, the comments section exploded. Some residents shared fond memories of the spring, others questioned the rushed decision and lack of transparency. A few board members even messaged me privately, admitting they'd felt pressured to vote yes. Eleanor retaliated by sending cease and desist letters claiming defamation. But truth isn't defamation, and I kept posting updates. Then came the turning point. Mrs. Gable, who had lived in Cascade Heights for 60 years, posted a comment that silenced the doubters. That spring saved our neighborhood during the 1978 drought when the city water failed. We all got our drinking water from that spring back then. It's not just pretty, it's essential. Suddenly, people were really listening. They shared their own memories, their growing doubts about Eleanor's true motives. The tide was finally turning. But Eleanor wasn't finished. That night, I received an anonymous call. "Drop the website or you'll regret it," a disguised voice threatened. The tone, however, was chillingly familiar. The roar of heavy machinery jolted me awake at dawn. Industrial pumps lined my property border, their engines deafening as they began sucking the life out of my spring. Eleanor stood supervising chic designer sunglasses, shielding her eyes, while Mike directed workers in bright orange vests. I ran outside, still in my pajamas. "Stop, this is illegal." Eleanor turned completely unfazed. Article 7, Section 3 of the HOA bylaws. We have the authority to address immediate safety hazards. She waved official-looking documents. Judge Miller signed this emergency order last night. Before my eyes, my spring, which had flowed crystal clear for generations, was being transformed into a muddy pit. 100-year-old lily pads shriveled as the water level plummeted. A family of ducks waddled in confused circles around their rapidly disappearing home. I called 911, but the operator dismissed it as a civil matter. I called animal control about the displaced wildlife, but they needed 48 hours' notice. I felt utterly helpless as my family's legacy drained away through thick industrial hoses. Emily emerged, her phone already recording everything. "This is criminal, Sue," she said, her voice shaking with anger. Mike stepped forward menacingly. "Ma'am, I need you to stop filming. This is private HOA business. This is my property." I countered hotly. "And that's my spring you're destroying." By noon, it was gone. A crater of cracked, drying mud remained where sparkling water once flowed. The ancient willow trees already showed signs of distress, their leaves curling in protest. Janice appeared at her fence line later that afternoon, nonchalantly planting new roses. "Sorry about your water feature," she mumbled without looking up, "but property values should improve now." I stared at her in disbelief. "Janice, do you realize that spring fed the groundwater for this entire area?" She just shrugged. "Eleanor says the city water system is perfectly adequate." That evening, I met with Dave, a hydrologist friend from college. He studied my property maps and the historical surveys. I'd found his expression growing increasingly concerned. "This is bad," he muttered, shaking his head. "Really bad. Your spring wasn't just decorative, it was a natural pressure release valve for the entire aquifer system." "So what happens without it?" I asked, dread pooling in my stomach. "The water has to go somewhere," he explained grimly. "It'll find the path of least resistance, which unfortunately is probably straight up through people's basements." A tiny glimmer of hope sparked within me. If I could prove the spring's essential role, maybe I could force them to restore it. We spent the next week gathering data. Dave installed monitoring equipment around the neighborhood, measuring soil moisture and groundwater levels. The readings were alarming. Pressure was building rapidly beneath Cascade Heights. I tried presenting this urgent information at the next HOA meeting, but Eleanor had already changed the rules. "Only board members can add items to the agenda now," she announced smugly. Frustrated but determined, I went public. The local news picked up the story, "Historic Spring Destroyed by HOA Raises Flood Concerns." Reporters interviewed Mrs. Gable about the 1978 drought, and environmental groups expressed outrage. Eleanor fought back fiercely, hiring a PR firm to paint me as a disgruntled homeowner spreading misinformation. They released slick statements about modernizing infrastructure and protecting families. The battle escalated. Eleanor filed a lawsuit against me for defamation. I countersued for property damage and destruction of a natural resource. Legal bills began mounting on both sides. Then the inevitable happened. The Johnsons, living 6 houses down, woke up to find 3 inches of water flooding their finished basement. Their insurance company promptly called it groundwater intrusion and denied the claim. 2 days later, the Garcias reported water seeping through their foundation. Then the Parkinsons. And then, ironically, Janice. I watched from my window as Janice frantically bailed water from her own basement, her recently planted prized roses now drowning in the oversaturated soil. Part of me felt a grim sense of vindication, but mostly I just felt sad. This disaster was entirely preventable. Emergency HOA meetings became tense weekly events. Residents demanded answers, waiving repair bills and insurance denial letters. Eleanor kept deflecting. "These are isolated incidents," she insisted, Old pipes, poor drainage, nothing to do with the spraying removal. But Dave's data told a different, undeniable story. The aquifer, deprived of its natural release valve, was forcing water upwards through every available crack and seam. The entire neighborhood water table was destabilizing. I shared Dave's charts and findings on the neighborhood Facebook group. The comments exploded. My sump pump hasn't stopped running in days. There's literally a spring bubbling up in my backyard now. My foundation guy says the repairs could cost $50,000. Property values plummeted. 3 houses went up for sale almost immediately. The local news returned this time with much harsher headlines. HOA's decision creates neighborhood nightmare. Cascade Heights underwater after spring drainage. Eleanor grew desperate. She tried blaming the city, the recent weather, even global warming. Anything but her own catastrophic decision. She even bizarrely suggested I had somehow sabotaged the neighborhood drainage systems. But the real bombshell was yet to come, thanks to Mr. Davies, the retired lawyer. Follow the money, he advised me over coffee one afternoon. He'd done some digging of his own. Eleanor's brother-in-law doesn't just do fake geological surveys, he revealed. He owns Cascade Drainage Solutions. Together, we uncovered the truth. Eleanor had awarded an exclusive no-bid $2 million contract to her brother-in-law's company to manage the escalating water issues in Cascade Heights. The very same company that had drained my spring was now being paid exorbitant sums to supposedly fix the problems that drainage had directly caused. It was a classic kickback scheme. Armed with this, I filed a formal complaint with the State Attorney General's office. Investigators arrived within days. They subpoenaed HOA financial records, interviewed board members, and meticulously documented the growing water damage throughout the neighborhood. Eleanor tried to resign quietly, hoping to slip away before the walls closed in, but furious residents demanded a public meeting. The school auditorium was packed to the rafters. Angry homeowners waved soggy repair bills and insurance denials. When Eleanor took the microphone, attempting a calm demeanor, boos erupted from the crowd. She tried to speak about unforeseen circumstances and acting in good faith, but no one was buying her excuses anymore. Then I played my trump card. Emily, my wife, had continued recording that fateful morning they drained the spring. Deep in the background of one video clip, barely audible but captured clearly by the phone's microphone, Eleanor could be heard telling Mike, the maintenance manager, "Once property values drop enough, my developer friends will buy up the whole block cheap. We'll all make millions." The auditorium exploded. People shouted for Eleanor's immediate arrest. Several board members resigned on the spot. Janice tearfully stood up and publicly apologized, admitting Eleanor had promised her special favors for her vote. Right on cue, state investigators entered the auditorium and took a stunned Eleanor Vance into custody. That night, she faced a battery of charges: fraud, conspiracy, misuse of HOA funds, and environmental violations. Her brother-in-law's company declared bankruptcy almost immediately, and the shady developer scheme collapsed. However, our neighborhood's problems were far from over. Homes were still flooding. Insurance companies had officially declared it a man-made disaster, washing their hands of the claims. Homeowners faced potential financial ruin. In the end, it took a federal disaster declaration to secure the necessary help. Engineers worked for months, painstakingly designing and implementing systems to restore the natural water flow. My spring was eventually rebuilt, but the ecosystem and the community's trust would take years to fully recover. The total cost climbed past $10 million, mostly covered by Eleanor's seized assets and the HOA's liability insurance. Eleanor Vance was ultimately sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Janice surprisingly stepped up to lead a reformed HOA board now fiercely focused on transparency and environmental preservation. She now tends a beautiful memorial garden near where my spring flows once again, often seen teaching local children about the vital importance of working with nature, not against it. As for me, I learned that sometimes the most potent revenge isn't plotting intricate schemes. It's simply allowing nature and justice to take their inevitable course. Water always finds its way, and eventually, so does the truth. This whole ordeal hammered home a crucial lesson: nature operates on complex systems we often don't fully understand. When greed or arrogance leads us to disrupt that balance, ignoring history, cutting corners, and silencing dissent, the consequences can be devastating, rippling far beyond what we initially intended. It also taught us the immense power of community. While one person's corruption nearly destroyed Cascade Heights, it was the collective action of residents demanding transparency, seeking truth, and ultimately working together that led to accountability and healing. Never underestimate the importance of questioning authority, demanding facts, and respecting the environment that sustains us. What are your thoughts on this story? Have you ever encountered issues with an HOA or seen the consequences of ignoring environmental warnings? Share your experiences and opinions in the comments below. If you found this story compelling, please consider subscribing for more real-life accounts and important lessons learned.